We don't rock, we talk. Today's News Talk, TNT Radio. Patrick Henningsen and TNT.
And welcome back to the Patrick Henningsen Show with me, Basil Valentine, in for Patrick. Today, Wednesday, the 28th of February. George Galloway's rival campaign is whipping people into a frenzy after he received a death threat on social media. I'm talking, of course, about Simon Danczuk, a former Labour MP who is now standing for Reform UK. And he said he's received a string of direct messages and a video where an online troll appears to threaten to gun him down. It's just outrageous. And I do actually link it to the campaigning that Galloway's been doing in Rochdale. He's really whipping up division. And I think that's really unfortunate. In the footage, which has been posted on Reform's UK social media page, the online creator is heard uttering expletives before threatening to put one in his head. I think this is grandstanding from Danczuk. I in no way condone whatever it is this chap has been saying, but I don't think it's a serious death threat. And I don't think Galloway's campaign is divisive either. I think George is all about unity across races, religions, ages and classes, isn't he, Chris?
Absolutely. I mean, it is a unifying campaign, and George is clearly focusing on the issue of Gaza, but not just that. He has raised a number of clearly local concerns. I mean, for example, he's made the point that you can't even be born in Rochdale anymore because the maternity hospital has been closed down. You can't even die in Rochdale now because the accident and emergency department has been closed and moved out. So he is campaigning on those issues, on those local issues, because working class communities in Rochdale have been badly let down by all the major parties, predominantly Labour, because it's been a Labour fiefdom for forever really, and they've not fought for the people there. And look, George is somebody who has clearly got a reputation for not taking no for an answer, for speaking his mind. And he will certainly be a great champion if he's elected for the people of Rochdale on those local important issues, those issues, as I've said, in terms of the National Health Service, in terms of access to decent housing and trying to sort out the crumbling infrastructure there. But also, of course, his strong voice in opposition to war and certainly in opposition to the genocide, which many people in Rochdale, as across the whole country, feel very, very strongly about. And nobody else is actually articulating those concerns other than George Galloway. And I know Simon Danczuk. In fact, I went to his wedding, actually, I mean, obviously, back in the day, he invited me. And I used to get on with him. But look, I mean, I don't know what's happened to Simon. I think he's clearly grandstanding here. Nobody would condone death threats, of course not. But to suggest that in some way George is responsible is truly absurd. I mean, it reminds me, frankly, of the despicable accusations that were made against Jeremy Corbyn, a more peace-loving individual you couldn't wish to meet. And yet he was being accused of a similar sorts of things. These are just dirty tricks, dirty tactics, and they should have no place in politics, actually, Basil. But sadly, the likes of Simon Danczuk and others, it's their default position. And this is why a lot of people get turned off politics. I think politics should be an honourable thing about trying to, create a better world, to speak up for people and give people a voice, as it were. But maybe that's one of the reasons that I was attacked, like Jeremy Corbyn was when I was a member of Parliament, because I very much believed in democratising the Labour Party and giving people a voice and obviously speaking out in support of the Palestinian people. And, I was accused of being an anti-Semite. I was accused of being a Jew baiter, of facilitating anti-Semitism. Ironically, for speaking up for predominantly, it was the people that I was speaking up for were themselves Jewish. Thousands of Jewish people are opposed to what is happening in Gaza right now. And these marches in London that we've seen, there is a huge contingent of anti-Zionist Jews who wear their heart on their sleeve. They're very clear that, not in our name. And they make it very, very abundantly clear to anyone who will listen that, this is not, Netanyahu does not speak for them. And the Zionists in this country do not speak for them. But regrettably, they don't get the oxygen and publicity on the corporate media outlets, because they tend to go to the Zionist voices regrettably, and the likes of the Board of Deputies and the various other groups
Community
like
Security, the CST,
which has been outed as being very close to Mossad, the Israeli intelligence services. I mean, these characters are crooks, and they are peddling a false narrative. And this is what, regrettably, Simon Danchuk has resulted in, because I think he can see his campaign is tanking, and George's campaign is going from strength to strength.
I'm looking forward to seeing how the legacy media frame the campaign of Andrew Feinstein, who is standing against Keir Starmer.
Well, they probably call him a self-hating Jew or something like that, but
that's what Jewish Zionists like to call Jewish anti-Zionists.
Exactly.
But it's harder for the corporate media to use that kind of term without themselves being accused of being anti-Semites. So
no, you're right.
I'm not quite sure how they're going to deal with Andrew Feinstein, and I hope he wins. But first of all, back to Rochdale. The disowning of the Labour candidate was the latest pantomime, frankly, in the Labour Party's contortions not to do anything to upset the Israel lobby, when Mr. Ali was disowned completely by the party for having said that he believed that the Israeli government had prior knowledge of the events of October 7th. Now, that's a theory with considerable evidence to back it up, that's been widely reported in the Israeli media, with lengthy investigations about the stand down orders. I remember also seeing some posts on social media in the immediate aftermath of October the 7th saying basically no way could the Israeli authorities have not known about what was going to happen, and that the follow on from that is obviously that they allowed it to happen. Whether or not they directly participated in it as a 100% false flag, I don't know, but they certainly allowed it to happen in order to precipitate the complete destruction and ethnic cleansing of Gaza that we are now witnessing. Now, whichever way you look at it, speculating that Israel had prior knowledge of October the 7th is in no way anti-Semitic. It's got nothing to do with hating Jewish people. It's an observation about an extremely important event that's resulted in the deaths of tens of thousands of innocent people. But the Labour Party is so absolutely hysterical and also so completely supine when it comes to the Israel lobby that they decided to disown this bloke. Ironically, of course, at first, this saw I follow it on the betting exchanges, Chris, this saw his support appear to tank. But then it became clear that, in fact, the fact that he'd been disowned by the Labour Party was, if anything, an advantage, because the Labour Party was so unpopular that it was a boost to his campaign that he could say it had nothing to do with them. I mean, really bizarre.
No, it is. I mean, what a topsy-turvy world in which we are living right now. I mean, look, you're absolutely right. I mean, that theory has been carried, as you mentioned, in the Israeli press. It's been carried by the New York Times, actually, no less. Did a big feature on it. So this is it's not a theory I happen to agree with. I mean, I think that the resistance fighters did actually outwit the Israeli occupation forces. I think they became incredibly complacent. But whether you take that view or whether you take the view that Azhar Ali articulated, it is in no way anti-Semitic. It's absurd to suggest it is, and you're absolutely right when you say that the Labour Party is utterly supine. But the Zionist movement has this kind of maximalist sort of strategy where they won't take yes for an answer, and they keep pushing and pushing and pushing. This guy was their man. I mean, he was supportive of the Zionists supporting so-called Jewish Labour movement. He was a big opponent of Jeremy Corbyn when Jeremy was elected back in 2015. Helped to kind of undermine Jeremy's leadership of the party. But as a result of him being dropped as the candidate, then the various groups like the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, Jewish Labour Movement, and all the revolting Zionist organisations were demanding that the party go still further, and they highlighted a number of other MPs and candidates who they felt had spoken out of turn. One of whom was a bloke called Graham Jones, who was the former MP in Blackburn, lost his seat in 2019. He was very instrumental in the whole sabotage of the Corbyn leadership. It was a case of a bit of a schadenfreude on my part when I saw the likes of him losing his seat as a result of their sabotaging activities. But he was at that same meeting where Azhar Ali had postulated that theory, and he made some expletive remark. He referred to Israel with an expletive. He has now been suspended. Now, this is a man, as I say, was at the centre of the efforts to smash Jeremy Corbyn. And when I was targeted and suspended, and then I was momentarily reinstated following an inquiry for just 48 hours, but there was a huge furore about it. 150 MPs and Labour MPs and peers had signed a letter demanding that I be suspended again. And they made the point that, look, if Labour is genuinely serious about tackling anti-Semitism, then Chris Williamson has to go. He was one of the key signatories to that letter. And yet here we are, a few years later, he's being hoisted with his own petard. I mean, it's an absolute nonsense, of course. And, frankly, I think the timidity of the so-called socialist campaign group of Labour MPs in actually failing to stand up to Sir Keir Starmer and failing to stand up for the Palestinian people, it's been lukewarm to say the least, the support that they've given. I mean, it illustrates just how far the Labour Party in Parliament, and indeed in the country really, has fallen. These people aren't fit, frankly, in my opinion, to call themselves socialists, and they're certainly not fit to be public representatives. Because, as I've always said, Basil, look, if you have a political platform, you have an obligation, in my opinion, to fight for what you believe in, to fight for what's right, to stand up for the people that elected you. What on earth are the Socialist Campaign Group MPs doing? I mean, when they signed a very tame statement about NATO's proxy war in Ukraine, it was a stop the war statement. It was a kind of, they were kind of as critical of Russia, which I think was totally wrong. But anyway, they was as critical of Russia as they were of NATO. And they put their name to it, about half a dozen or a dozen of them. Sir Keir Starmer issued instructions that they must remove their name within 24 hours or the whip would be withdrawn. Every single one of them did so. I'll tell you what, Basil, if I'd still been there, there's no way I would have withdrawn my name, I can tell you. And I'd have been making a much stronger statement, frankly, than the stop the war statement that they signed. But no, I mean, their response on what's happening in Palestine, it's been abysmal. But they're running scared. They're careerists. That's the problem, Basil. They fear for their career. And they fear that they will be targeted, that they'll be accused of being an anti-Semite, because anti-Semitism has been weaponized. And it's no coincidence that they initially, went for high-profile people like Ken Livingstone, former Mayor of London, former leader of the Greater London Council, somebody who has actually done more in public office than anybody, in my opinion, to advance the cause of anti-racism in the early 1980s. He earned the sobriquet as a loony lefty, partly for his stance on opposing racism. Then, in the autumn of his life, he's being deemed as a sort of a pariah, a racist, bigoted pariah. Absolutely disgraceful. So they went for him. They went for people like Jackie Walker, a prominent black Jewish woman whose parents actually fled the United States at the height of the McCarthy witch hunt in the 1950s. Then she found herself the victim of a McCarthyite witch hunt at the hands of the Labour Party. She was the vice chair of Momentum, the group that was established to support Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. She was targeted. She was suspended and then ultimately expelled. And so there were a number of people, outside Parliament. Then they came for me. And again, they didn't speak up for me. And, I was eventually suspended and I resigned from the party before they could actually expel me. But I was dropped as the official party candidate. But all of that was done to send a message to anybody else who dare or is maybe thinking of daring to raise their head above the parapet, that if you do that, your head will get shot off. And, this notion, this maxim that the Labour movement, trots out all the time about unity is strength. Well, there is no unity as far as the Socialist Campaign Group is concerned. These Labour MPs who claim to be, on the left and socialist, they are not prepared to stand in solidarity and speak up for and potentially take some consequences. But, look, if we'd have stood up, and indeed if Jeremy, frankly, had been a bit stronger and had not sought to placate the unplacatable and had fought the Zionist lobby, might not have won, but I think he would have a chance of doing so. But he facilitated it. I said to him, for God's sake, Jeremy, stop saying sorry. You've done nothing to apologise for. And every apology just fed the beast. It just made them stronger, and they thought, we're on to a winner here, and they kept going until they out, and then they've taken Jeremy out now, haven't they? And there's a number of other Socialist Campaign Group MPs who have suspended. Diane Abbott, Andy McDonald, various other MPs have gone as well. Kate Osamor, another one, have been kicked out.
Jeremy unfortunately allowed himself to be painted into a corner. He should really have gone on the counter-attack right from the very beginning. I mean, I remember
George Galloway pleaded with him to do so on numerous occasions. Appeal over the heads, he said, of the National Executive Committee. Appeal over the heads of the Parliamentary Labour Party. This is what George was saying, using his considerable platform on his moat show to do that. But unfortunately, the people around Jeremy, persuaded him to take a policy of appeasement, which was disastrous.
I know. I mean, I think Jeremy was basically too nice and a bit naive. I don't think he realised who he was dealing with the Zionists. That they are absolutely fanatical. They will stop at nothing, and they can't.
He'd been active, though, Basil, in the pro-Palestine campaign for many, many years, so he should have known. And he got into trouble partly for when he said that, the Zionists don't understand English irony. And that was then used against him when, this was when he was speaking on a platform with a anti-Zionist Holocaust survivor. And then the meeting was being disrupted by a bunch of Zionist extremists.
I know. I mean, it is absolutely absurd that you cannot even make a reference to not understanding irony without it being construed as some kind of hate speech or something. Absolutely bizarre. To go back to the Mr. Ali case in Rochdale, they were even pushing for, the Zionist groups were pushing for other councillors who attended the meeting and sat in silence while Mr. Ali made his remarks to also be expelled from the party because they didn't speak up. So they condemn him in the moment. I mean, it's absolutely ludicrous. It really is. But on a serious note, absolutely appalling is this Archbishop of Canterbury, who refused to share a platform with Pastor Munter because Munter had shared a platform with Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, people are appalled. I'm very glad to see there's been some demonstrations. I can't get anybody from the Church of England to come and defend Welby's position. I've been trying to get a spokesman to come on this program. You can't get hold of anybody. I mean, basically, Jeremy, unfortunately, has made himself fair game. He is routinely described as an anti-Semite and a Jew hater in the Zionist press and by Zionists. And it seems that Welby's completely taken in by it. It's really sad.
Welby is a Zionist enabler. He's involved in various organisations which are, basically a front for, the promotion of Zionism. And we, in fact, if I could just give a shout out for the programme that I host called Palestine Declassified, we've just recorded an episode. I'm not sure when it's going to be going out because we will probably be covering the Rochdale by-election on our Saturday broadcast. It might be the Wednesday after because we're going twice a week now. But we've actually done a programme where we've looked at Welby's outbursts and his links to Zionism and so on. And we've had the guest on the show was the Reverend Dr. Stephen Sizer, who was kicked out of the Church of England because of his support for the Palestinian people. And Welby made an absolutely gratuitous statement attacking Stephen Sizer, a more lovely man you couldn't wish to meet, actually. And for him to be traduced like that by the Archbishop himself is utterly despicable. It really is.
I agree.
And he did nothing wrong. He did nothing wrong. All he did was basically, observe Christian values. That's what he did.
I know. I mean, Welby has been silent about the genocide. Welby said virtually nothing about the killing fields or people being systematically starved to death. Chris, first of all, quickly, where can people find you? You mentioned Palestine Declassified.
Yes, well, Palestine Declassified, it's a weekly broadcast, although we're going fortnightly. Sorry, beg your pardon. We're going twice weekly now. Beg your pardon. I'm not quite sure what the schedule is going to be, but we're on a Saturday at 5:30 live, and I think it's going to be on every Wednesday. But then we post it on Rumble, we post it on Twitter, we also post clips on Twitter, we also post clips on Telegram. So look out for Palestine Declassified. We're on Twitter. Palestine Declassified is on Twitter as @PDeclassified. And then you can follow me on Twitter as well. I'm at Chris, sorry, I beg your pardon, at Derby Chris, that's DERBY, at Derby Chris W, Derby at Derby Chris W on Twitter. And I'm also on Facebook, just look for Chris Williamson. Not to be confused with the reality TV star who was on Love Island. That's not me. He's a bit younger than me. It's not the same name.
And finally, Chris, is George going to win tomorrow?
Well, we're not counting any chickens. It's looking increasingly likely. The fact that the Labour Party's campaign has imploded, I think that was in some ways a deliberate attack. Yes, they responded to the Zionist smears, but whether that was manufactured or not remains to be seen, or is a moot point, should I say? Because I think they thought they were on a hiding to nothing anyway, and this will give them a bit of an excuse to get out of jail card. Well, we didn't actually field a proper candidate. We withdrew support from him. So it's a Pyrrhic victory for George Galloway. I suspect that was, more than anything was behind the decision to drop Azir Ali. But it's looking very, very positive. It really is. Although having said that, what we're concerned about is that some people may feel that it's in the bag and don't bother therefore turning up. I've also, as I've been knocking on doors, because Azir Ali is still on the paper as the Labour candidate because it was too late to remove that. So a number of people have still said they voted Labour. Not a lot, but some people have said, oh yeah, I voted Labour. Some actually have regretted saying Labour. I wish I hadn't. This is by post. I'm talking about people that voted by post. Right. But the vast majority has been very, very supportive, and it's been a great campaign. I mean, I've been up there a number of times. We've had loads of volunteers out on the street. As I've said, the reaction has been overwhelmingly popular, notwithstanding, the few pockets of people saying they're still going to vote for the Labour Party. So yeah, we're waiting with basically. We are very, very hopeful and optimistic, but it's not over till it's over. And at 10 o'clock, the polls close tomorrow, so we're going to be fighting for everyone. They're knocking up voters, on the day just to remind them to go out and vote. And we'll have a massive team of people. We've got lots of promises. We know where people, live that have said they're likely to vote for George, and we'll be going to just reminding them to make sure they turn out. And let's hope we vote, because it will be a huge boost, not just for Rochdale. This will send a message all over the country. Actually, probably all the way around the world, because George is an international figure, and it will give people hope that an alternative, is possible. That you can break the political duopoly in this kind of, ridiculous electoral. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today, Chris Williamson. Absolutely great to have you here on the Patrick Henningsen Show, and see you again very soon.
Great stuff. All the best. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks, Chris.
This is the Patrick Henningsen Show on TNT Radio.